Hello. Today we are going to make a 5-spice short ribs with a carrot and parsnip puree. So we start out with 4 pounds of beef short ribs. We're going to use approximately 2.5 teaspoons of salt, 1.5 teaspoons of pepper, 4 to 5 carrots and parsnips each, depends on their size. You want to essentially have an even amount of each. We're going to use some flour here to dust our ribs. So that's going to be by eye. We're going to use a tablespoon of tomato paste. And we love how tomato paste adds flavor to this dish. It gives it a nice depth. We're going to have 1.5 tablespoons of Chinese 5-spice, which you can find at your grocery store spice aisle very easily. I'm using nearly a full bottle of wine, red wine. It's important that it's red so that it can stand up to the rest of these flavors. A quart of beef stock or beef broth, whatever you happen to have on hand. I've got a small onion, a handful of garlic that we're going to add here as well. About a tablespoon, between a half and a full tablespoon of yogurt is going to help us round out our puree with a little creaminess. And then we're going to use 2 tablespoons of butter and a little bit of nutmeg in our puree. So let's get started. Okay, so first things first, we need to season our ribs before we start browning them. So I've got my 1.5 tablespoons of 5-spice here, and we're going to go ahead and sprinkle that on here at the top. Reserve a little bit of that, and I'm also at the same time going to dust it with flour. And for this, I'm going to just use a measuring spoon to just get a little bit out here. And this way I keep everything in one place as far as, I don't want to say getting dirty goes, but that's really what it is. So I'm just going to use my tongs to bring the pieces up from the bottom and the pieces that are on top down below. I know this may not look very, polished, but it has served me well. I've gotten pretty much everything coated as much as it needs to be when I've done it this way. But feel free, go in, get your hands nice and involved, if you will. Stay right there, buddy. Just going to move these pieces around so we can get a little more coating. And I don't get crazy about it, as you can see, though it'll all get everywhere. So a little bit more. So it's about 2, maybe just a little bit less than 2 tablespoons of flour that I end up putting in here. And as I pick up each piece, it ends up dusting all the way around, so I don't worry about it. And then our Chinese 5-spice, the rest of that on here. And at this point, I'm going to turn on my pan. I have a pan set up. I'll move right here. So I have a pan set up right here, and I've put in a little bit of vegetable oil. I'm going to turn on the heat so that we can brown each of these pieces. And because I'm putting this into my my slow cooker, I've got my slow cooker back here, the crock of the slow cooker back here. That's what this black thing is. But I need to keep it away from the heat, so that's why it's pushed further back. But as I brown each piece, it's going to go from the pan into the pot, and then I will take care of the vegetables, heating up the broth, combining the wine, seasoning that with all salt and pepper, along with our tomato paste. So we're going to get that going here in just a moment. So we're ready to get our ribs browning. The oil is just, you might be able to see it just right here. It's starting to shimmer. So I'm going to not crowd my pan, put a few pieces in. And we're going to do this in batches. So I'm going to let each piece brown. Once it's done browning, it's going to go into the crock pot back here. And then we're going to take care of our vegetables. So we're going to have it brown on each side. I have about a medium-high heat going right now. And you just want to keep an eye on it because the meat itself has fat on the outside. And it's going to start breaking some of that fat down and rendering it. So you're going to end up with some more fat in your pan, which is why I don't start with a lot to begin with. A lot of fat, that is. Now, because my pan is nice and hot, I can turn this one over and you can see it's already brown beautifully. So I'm going to turn this one over as well. Beautifully brown. This one might take just another moment because remember, this is the hot part of our pan. This is not as hot, so just turn this one over. And beautifully browned as well. So we're going to let the back sides go just a little bit. The bone is there, so there's not any significant amount of meat. But what I am going to start doing is flipping them up on their sides so that each side will have a chance to brown before I put it into the crock pot itself. So this process will take you a few minutes. Take your time. Make sure all the sides are brown, including this side here. When I do this top side, I actually hold it with my tongs. We don't want things falling out or falling out of your pan. If you have a higher sided pot, you can do it there as well. But the reason I use a low sided pan to do this is so that the steam that's created can also escape. So let's do this side. Sometimes I need them to help one another stay up, so I'll use the sides of the pan. I'll flip this one off to its side as well. Same with this guy. Look at how beautifully that's browning. And then I'll show you how I just hold it up when it's doing the other, each of the top and bottom sides. So we'll give that just a moment. We'll let that brown. And because it's browning so quickly, let me just show you. So I will hold it, literally hold it up, and that's why having a long pair of tongs is helpful, for about maybe 30 seconds on each side, and then it'll go into the crock pot pan. All right, so see it's brown. I'll get another spot here that I haven't used. And then into the crock pot it'll go. So we're going to continue this process until all 4 pounds are done, and it won't take very long, as you can see. So we've got our beef ribs all browned. We're going to add all our vegetables in one go here. And I used 1 carrot and 1 parsnip for this. And our garlic and onion. The rest of the parsnips and the garlic are reserved for the puree we're going to make separately. You notice I didn't have a lot of fat. I had just enough. If you needed a little more oil, add a little more oil. But I'm going to let these brown just a little bit. And while they're doing that, from my container where I had my beef, I still have a little bit of flour and Chinese spice, 5 spice. So I'm going to use that. And you saw, that's why I only used a little bit. I don't want a lot, but whatever was in there, I'm going to make sure I get added to the pan. And the onions are starting to sweat, so they're helping me bring up all of this fond that has adhered to the bottom of our pan, and that's all excellent flavor we want to incorporate. So let this cook for just a couple minutes, and you can see I just roughly chopped everything, and the reason is I'm going to puree this at the end of the day. So I don't need it to be perfect. I just kind of wanted everything a fairly similar size. So while it's cooking, everything will cook evenly based on how thick. You know, like a carrot is much more dense than a piece of onion. So there we go. All right, so our next move is to add in our tomato paste. So I've got a good, I got to use my finger on this one. Got to get it all out of there. So we get our tomato paste, and we'll go ahead and incorporate that. And get it off our finger a little bit more. Oops, we got a jumper there. So I do this a little just so that you can see the tomato paste is starting to get a little stuck to the bottom of my pan. I do that on purpose, just so it gets a little bit of roasted flavor. And then using either your chicken stock or your wine, I'm going to use my wine. We're going to deglaze. So I put a little bit. And we're going to have to add some more. Just a little bit. And you see how the wine is nice and thick? That's because of the flour. Flour and the tomato paste combining. So I'm going to finish adding in my wine. That's going to basically cook off the alcohol here for just a moment. Doesn't have to be perfect. It's going to be cooking in our slow cooker for about 6 to 8 hours. So there isn't going to be any alcohol left in this. All right, and I'm going to put some of my stock in here. And just for ease, I'm going to put the rest right into my crock pot. And I'm going to season this with the salt. Yes, I'm doing that by eye. Salt and pepper. And it's already pretty much coming to that simmer that I want. It looks great. Look at that deep color where we're going to have. It's going to be beautiful to look at, but even better to eat. Okay, so now this is going to go into the crock pot itself. So we'll take care of that right now. All right, so you see I've got my ribs in here with some of the broth. I'm just going to spoon this in because I don't want to make too much of a mess. Browning the beef tends to splatter, so I've got enough to clean up. Don't want to make any more. But also, if you try pouring this, you're pouring into something that already has liquids, and as these solids go in there, they're going to plop. And, you know, it's all fun and games until someone gets hot vegetables plopping all over the place and burning them. So let me just finish getting these. And once I only have liquids and no more root vegetables to spoon up, just going to pour the rest in. So, but just do what you're comfortable with. All right, let's get this in the crock pot. Okay, so we've got our food in our crock and the crock in the pot itself. So I've set this for 8 hours on low. I'm going to cover it up and we'll check back with it in about 4 hours, see how it's doing. You'll notice that some of the meat is not already in the liquid. I don't worry about that at this stage because in about 4 hours, I'll see how much more liquid is already in there. I'll move things around a little bit and everything will be submerged. So I don't get worried about it. You can see it's already warmed up and ready to go. So we'll check back in about 4 hours. So here we are at 4 hours in. You can see things are looking really good. I'm going to cover that up again. So we're going to let this go for another 4 hours. And at that point, we'll take the meat out. We're going to reduce the liquid. We're going to pull out all of the vegetables. And then because we're going to put it over a puree of carrots and parsnips, we're not going to actually puree the vegetables because we'll already have that flavor underneath in our final presentation. So we'll be back in 4 hours. It's time to make our vegetables. So I'm going to heavily salt my boiling water. And I've cut up the vegetables. All right, so we've got our parsnips and our carrots, and I've made them essentially the same size. So in the bowl they go, in the pot they go. They'll be cooking for about 15 minutes. And in the meantime, I have taken, we'll let this come back up to a boil. It's going to take about 15 minutes. So in the meantime, our short ribs are completely cooked, and I have removed them from the pan, from the crock pot, I should say. And I've taken them out and I've put them in a bowl. I'm just going to cover that up so it stays fairly warm. They're not going to get very cold considering how long I'm going to have it out. So if you're concerned about that, cover it with a piece of foil. What we're going to do now is strain all of the liquids out and reduce that. So let's get to that. So in a second pot, we're going to take the liquid from the cooking liquid, which I have about 4 cups of cooking liquid, and we're going to put that in a good sized pot here, and we're going to let that reduce down to about half. That'll take about 15 minutes, just about the same amount of time it'll take for our vegetables, and if it needs a little bit more, that's fine. So we're going to let that reduce by half. The way we'll know that it's ready is we'll put a spoon in there, run our finger through the back of the spoon, and as long as it leaves a quote-unquote clean trail, it should be ready to go. So we're going to get this to reduce down for us, and it'll take, like I said, about 15 minutes. All right, our vegetables are fork tender. There's like no resistance whatsoever. I can pierce them with no problem. So I'm going to drain them and bring them back to the pot. So give me just a moment, but reserve a little bit of this water because we might need it to help thin things out. So don't get rid of all of the water when you're done. So the key when you want to puree something is you have to have liquids. You can't just puree something that's solid. So we're going to put our 2 tablespoons of butter in there. We're going to add in our yogurt, and I've thinned out the yogurt with some water. I'm going to put some of the braising, the cooking liquid in here as well, which I've saved off to the side, because that's going to be the only way you're able to actually puree this. Now you can leave this as chunky as you'd like, but it does need a little bit of liquid in here. Okay, so I put some in my measuring cup here to get the rest of the yogurt out. And you can use milk or heavy cream. I just like having the yogurt. That's just a personal preference. So I'm going to add a little bit more liquid. All told, of the cooking liquid, I'll be adding about 2 cups. Okay? And I've kept more cooking liquid off to the side just in case I need it. So now we're going to come in here with our immersion blender. Make sure that it's underneath the liquid. And you're going to do it in steps. until you have the desired consistency. And again, I can add more liquid should I need it, which is why I don't just keep it going the whole time. I do each section. And it looks rather thick to me right now, so I am actually going to add a little bit more cooking liquid in here. So let's keep that going. All right, so you can see I'm just going around a couple more passes here. You can see this is nice and thick. And that didn't go to waste, I tasted it. You can taste the parsnips. You get the sweetness from the carrots. I am going to adjust the seasoning just a little bit. And the way I'm going to do that after I get a little bit more of this off is I'm going to put a little bit of nutmeg. And if you've seen any of my videos in the past, I actually have whole nutmeg. And I grate it right then and there using a microplane. It's a unique flavor. You can see the inside of the nutmeg here. So get the rest of that. And this, again, I do this to taste. It's a pungent little flavor. So I try not to put too much on the onset. So I'll mix that in, give it a taste, and I may add some more. But at this point, once I mix this in, our puree is ready to go. All right, well, everything's ready. So we're gonna go ahead and put it on our plate. So we'll start with the carrot and parsnip puree. This is all of our vegetables, so I'm rather generous with how much I put on the plate. I'll put a little bit more. Like I said, I'm very generous with how much goes on there. Then I'm going to put one good size short rib right on there. And then lastly, we have our reduced cooking liquid. So I'm just going to pour that around the edges, and there you have it. This is a 5-spice beef short rib over carrot and parsnip puree. It does take a little bit of time using the slow cooker. You could always do this in a Dutch oven in the oven for about 60 minutes as opposed to the 8 hours I did in the slow cooker. But either way, that is delicious.